I was visiting my boyfriend in Aberystwyth when I overheard some people on the seafront asking when are the Jews arriving. I was baffled. When I asked a local person, they explained that a large community of Orthodox Jews came every year for a couple of weeks in August and stayed in the university accommodation at the top of the hill. They would come from all over, New York, Canada, Israel, but mostly London and Manchester. They spent the mornings in a conference and then in the afternoon came down to the seafront or went up to enjoy the town. I said to a number of different families that if they were happy for me to photograph them, then I would take some portraits of their children for free. Hasidic Holiday Makers by Chloe Ju Matthews. The boys in this shot had been feeding the seagulls with bread, which is why the birds are circling overhead. I caught them right before they all got into formation for a family photo. They were just messing about. The young boy was chasing the gulls and we were chatting about what they'd done that day. I liked the palette of the shot, that grey blue of the British seaside holiday, with thin cloud over the whole sky and seagulls swirling. There was an incident in 2013 where something caught alight in one of the flats, so the university barred the community from using them, saying it was a health and safety issue because they use candles. It's really sad, as the families had been going to Aberystwyth for more than 20 years. Most people I approached were happy to chat to me. That was what interested me. Here is a community often perceived as outsiders, as people who don't want to talk to anyone outside their group. And there they are, out on the beach enjoying family holidays. I wanted to reflect that warmth. NF Iggy's Wild, and HES Still Killing It. Lindsey Burns Iggy Pop at FYF by Lindsey Barnes. I love Iggy Pop. HE's Wild, HES a spectacle, and HES Still Just Killing It. HE's so punk and so tough, but I also think that if he wasn't performing, he would be the nicest guy. This was taken at FYF Fest, a 3-day music event in Los Angeles. For me, what makes a good live photo is the moment of eye contact. I got lucky, though. There were so many photographers in the pit and there's a lot of dynamics around positioning yourself. I'm only 51, so I'm not really going to get in anybody's way, although I did have a stool with me. Every photographer brings stools these days. My autofocus wasn't working, so I was adjusting the camera manually. I'd spotted some stairs and knew Iggy was going to go down them into the pit at some point, so I wasn't all that concerned about what was happening while he was on stage. If he had laid down and rolled around I wouldn't have been able to see it anyway, because I'm too short. NF They do a 3-sausage sandwich here. Peter Dench Lay by Picnickers by Peter Dench. Photograph Peter Dench. Reportage by Getty. In the summer of 1998, I went on assignment to what was apparently the most sociable lay-by in England, the Old Willoughby Hedge on the A303. All sorts of people would stop there, from the army to missionaries on their way to spread the joy of Jesus to Exeter. There were people sunbathing in their socks, children playing badminton, all against a backdrop of articulated lorries thundering past. I asked one sunbather where his destination was and he just said here. When I asked why, he looked at me like I was mad and replied, "You get 3 sausages in your sandwich here." The older girl had terrible burns, caused by a freak caravan fire on a previous holiday. We were pottering around when 2 cars towing caravans pulled in and this lovely scene unfolded. Sandwiches were unwrapped, biscuits and a flask of hot drink shared. 3 generations of family had been on holiday to Dawlish, in Devon, and were on their way home to Epsom. They'd been up packing since 6 a.m., so they were in need of a break. After a while, I noticed that the older girl, Hayley, had some terrible burns on her face and body. Her scalp looked raw and there were sores on her head, but it wasn't a new wound. Apparently, on a previous holiday, there had been a freak flash fire in a caravan they'd been staying in. They think a fragment of broken glass had ignited in the sun. She wasn't self-conscious about it, though. You can see SHES got a smile on her face, her hair is up and she was keen to be photographed posing with her favorite packet of biscuits. As a photojournalist, you tend to dismiss the more posed shots, where people look directly into the camera, but sometimes when you hold someone's gaze like this it just works. I think the picture says something about British stoicism. This family had been through a terrible incident but they were undeterred and continued to go on caravan holidays. That's how we are as holiday makers. Well, drive to the seaside in the rain, well, eat fish and chips in the car and well, soldier on. Our motto seems to be next year will be better. TJ, it's harvest time and life is harsh. David Goldblatt. Afrikaners at Harvest by David Goldblatt. In the early 1960s, I became very interested in photographing the people of the plots, Afrikaners who lived on small holdings around Randfontein, the town where I was born, near Johannesburg. I would drive around, knock on a door and ask if I could take photographs of whatever life was taking place. At the time I worked in my father's shop, a men's clothing shop, and I had become acquainted with these people, and their language when they came to buy clothes. They had a profound fear of black people, yet their relations with them could be affectionate and generous. It was the beginning of the harvest. Younger people were taking part, including the girl who was helping. It was an unusually bucolic scene. Most of these places were harsh, in the landscape and in the standard of living, harsh, too, in terms of the relationships between the white owners and the black servants who lived on the plots. I didn't speak with the owners, so I couldn't say this about them in particular, but many others were deeply racist. They had a profound fear of black people. At the same time, they had a relationship with them on the plots that was intimate and affectionate, generous to a degree that surpassed what I knew from my middle-class urban life. One Saturday, I found a family gathered around some woodwork. It turned out to be a coffin they were making for the neighbor's black servant who had died. Because they knew that the family could not afford a coffin, they were making one, which is a considerable thing to make if you're going to do it properly. They were taking a great deal of trouble over it, while joking about whether the lady would fit, about whether they'd need to tie knots in her legs, or cut her neck. The combination of great generosity and crudity was astonishing. DBS David Goldblatt will have a sole exhibition at Goodman Gallery, Johannesburg, in July 2018. The corn's hair is like a huge orgasm. Wolfgang Tillmans. Husked corn by Wolfgang Tillmans. When I lived in New York in the mid-90s, it was the first time I'd seen colored corn, and they made it into a couple of still lifes. Corn is like agave succulents that have always interested me as shapes sculpturally, their outlines and volumes and fleshiness and body. But they've proven extremely difficult to photograph. The agave I tried for 20 years. Only a few years ago, I found a cut-off piece on a wayside in La Palma on the Canary Islands, and I made a still life with it. That seemed to be the moment I was able to make it my own. With the corn, it's similar. The fascination with this fresh corn on the cob is of course when you unpeel it, it's extremely virgin inside. This hair, these strings, I don't know what their role is, but they seem to stay fresh for only minutes. What makes me happy about this picture is that it's so unlikely that it would work, but I think it does. The upward angle is very phallic and the hair becomes like a huge orgasm, but at the same time, it is a pure natural beauty. I never make deliberate art historic references, but certain subjects have a fascination, a charge that has interested artists through the centuries. The idea of a fruit, at this lush pinnacle moment, which will eventually perish. It's like a hinging moment. On the one hand, they have a meaning, but on the other hand, they are incredible volumes and that interests me. I've always understood photography as a tool to talk about three-dimensional objects. It's unlikely this subject could work and not just be too beautiful. Sometimes something looks too good and then that wears off, but here there is a mysteriousness. It's not uncanny but a little bit strange. It's not a pretty depiction of nature, and it's celebrating life, I guess. And all we had to do was wait for the sunset. Alice Hawkins. Havana at Dusk by Alice Hawkins. Cuba is a fairy tale place. I like that you can just stay in people's houses or wander into someone's home and eat with a family. My last trip there was for a fashion shoot with Love magazine in 2012. We had so many clothes that the stylist had to stay over the road from me with this glamorous single mum called Lily and her son Richard. We put her in a Versace outfit and she just owned it. I thought Lily was so sexy and hot that I asked her to be a model in one of our shoots. We put her in a Versace outfit and she just owned it. She knew exactly what she was doing. My work is influenced by 18th century portraiture, which is why they are both posing in a formal manner. HTHE boy ended up throwing a strop after about 20 minutes. I have another shot of him lying on the floor in a mood while his mother stands there in her high heels telling him to get up. This was taken just around the corner from Lily's house. I had seen an Art Deco building that looked beautiful. All we had to do was wait for the sun to go down. Although it is not a shot of a sunset, you can sense that's what's happening from the way the buildings are all lit up in different colors. Cuba won't stay like this forever. It is only a matter of time before you see a McDonald's or an HSBC in a scene like this. It is as if you are seeing everything through a 1950s style Instagram filter. Today he certainly wasn't trying to blend in John Tonks. A Scorpion in Namibia by John Tonks. I was on my way to St. Helena, having left Cape Town on a Royal Mail ship. To break up the journey they kick you off for a day in Namibia, where I was handed a leaflet for the Small 5 safari. It was a way to make money from cruise ship tourists, a tongue-in-cheek take on the Big 5 safaris you get elsewhere in Africa, the Big 5 being lion, elephant, buffalo, leopard and rhinoceros. Every now and then, the tour guide would stick his arm into the sand and bring out some creature. A group of us hopped into off-road vehicles and headed for the desert to look for lizards, scorpions, beetles, snakes and chameleons. I remember it being ridiculously hot, mid-30s or something, proper middle-of-the-day heat, when only an idiot would venture into the desert. The tour guide was quite a big chap, and every now and then he would stop his van, jump out and then run, dive and stick his arm into the ground before returning with some form of creature. This scorpion was one of them. He must have been wandering across the desert when suddenly he ends up being clamped in pliers and shown to tourists. When he got put back down, I stopped to take a couple of pictures. Then off we went looking for the next thing. Having said that, he was pretty brazen, poised there with his tail and tip up. He certainly wasn't interested in blending in. You've got this epic, stark desert behind you and then the contrast with this black creature silhouetted against the white sand. The Namibian desert is stunning, especially at sunrise and sunset, when all these rich colors come out. We were there at completely the wrong time. I would have loved to have stayed and seen the sunset, but we had to get back to the boat. TJ the car was a bull, the guy a matador. Martin Bogren, Boy Races by Martin Bogren. I spent 3 summers hanging around with this group of tractor boys, farmer kids from a remote Swedish village, similar to the one I grew up in. There is nothing much to do in this kind of place, other than drive cars or play football. Out of shot, there are 7 or 8 other cars positioned in a half circle. Each vehicle took turns to drive into the middle and do this crazy burnout thing, with smoke blowing out of the back. To me, the car was like a bull and the guy standing in the middle was the matador. There were girls watching it all unfold. They were quite bored, with nothing to do but smoke and look at the guy in the middle. It was like a mating dance, the boys taking turns to show off. A camera can be a wonderful tool for gaining access. If I'd turned up and said, "Hey, I'm 45, can I hang around with you guys for 3 summers?" they'd have told me no. I was able to win their trust. I also made the effort to get into their mindset. Before meeting up with them, I would sit in the woods and meditate, thinking I'm 15 years old, I'm 15 years old. Some evenings I really fooled myself and, what's more important, I think I fooled them. It was on those nights the best pictures happened. The light is so beautiful in Scandinavia in July and August. After the sun has gone down there's still light for another hour or two, seemingly coming from nowhere. It creates a special mood. It says summer is about to end and something else is about to come in. It is a time of shifts, and that's how it was for these boys. They were at that age between childhood and adulthood. Some of them would do a couple more years at school, others would start work. But for every one of them, life was about to change. TJ she charged our vehicle 10 times. Hank Willis Thomas, Kenyan Ostrich by Hank Willis Thomas. I did a residency at the Sigara retreat in Kenya this summer. It's primarily a nature reserve with lots of animals, including the white rhino. We had already seen cheetahs and leopards that day, but as we were driving over this ridge one of the guys pointed out a pair of ostriches. They're monogamous, and we could tell they had chicks because of the way they were behaving. The male walks away to get the chicks to safety and the female charges. I was in the front seat of an open vehicle, and the mother started running at us, about 10 times. She would turn away right before she hit, but it was still pretty impressive. She was at least 6 and I'm only 59, so it was pretty intimidating, especially when she raised her wings. It's hard not to feel like a cliché photographing wildlife, but at the same time it's great to witness it. I was practically singing the circle of life in my head all day. I was on the game drives for 2 weeks, and that was pretty humbling. I didn't appreciate what we're losing until I was there, not just how the animals live, but how we fit into their existence. We tend to see nature as something we're removed from, but it's critical for our survival. I shot this with an iPhone. Ironically, when I was shooting, it was actually winter in Kenya. NF Hank Willis Thomas' first solo UK exhibition, The Beautiful Game, is at Ben Brown Fine Arts, London, the 5th of October to the 24th of November.